My wife and I have been together for 5 years, and we've been married for 4 of them. We also have a 4-year-old child together. In our household, I'm the one who earns the income while she stays home with our daughter. This was a mutual decision, but in the end, it was her choice not to return to work, and I supported that. I do my best to help out at home. I'm not just a provider. I contribute by cooking, cleaning, and caring for our daughter, making an effort to be as involved in their lives as possible. However, over the past year and a half, our relationship has been strained. We argue several times a month, often over small things that turn into bigger issues. I remember the first time my wife mentioned divorce. It was during an argument that started when my sister asked if she could stay with us for a while because she was going through relationship problems. Without much hesitation, I said yes, assuming it wouldn't be an issue. But when I told my wife, she wasn't happy. Her reaction surprised me because just a few months before, one of her friends stayed with us for 5 weeks. There was no prior discussion. Her friend just showed up, and we made room for her. During her stay, this friend didn't contribute in any way, not financially and not with household tasks. She was a stranger to both me and our daughter, but I went along with it. In contrast, my sister is someone we both know well, and she has a great relationship with our daughter. When my sister stayed with us, she was incredibly helpful. She cooked, cleaned, and watched our daughter whenever needed. I thought the situation was completely different from the one with my wife's friend and felt it was fair, but it turned into a major source of tension between us. I believed we'd moved past it, but clearly some unresolved feelings remained. In general, our fights seemed to start over relatively small things. I don't usually feel like I'm the one initiating them, and I've suggested therapy or counseling multiple times to work through whatever underlying issues are causing this constant friction. But every time I bring it up, my wife insists she doesn't need help and dismisses the idea entirely. Last night, we had another argument. She accused me of spending too much time at work and said she felt abandoned. She went as far as to say I wasn't being a good father, which hurt deeply because I've always tried to be there for our daughter. I've never missed an important date, school function, doctor's appointment, or any event where she needs me. Then, in the heat of the moment, my wife brought up divorce again. This time, it didn't feel like an empty threat. I told her that the only reason I work so much is because she refuses to contribute financially. She spends money on things we don't need, and whenever I've asked her to get a job or consider going back to school to help ease the burden, she's refused. I've tried to make this marriage work, but every effort I make seems to be met with resistance. I told her I was done. I said I'd have my lawyer send over the divorce papers as soon as they were ready. Then, I gathered my daughter's things and left. I took her with me to my sister's house, where we've been staying for the past 2 days. Since then, my wife has been calling and texting constantly. She says she's sorry, that she didn't mean it, and that she's willing to go to therapy and counseling after all. She tells me she misses me and needs me back, but I don't know what to believe anymore. I love her, and I know she's a good mother to our daughter, but the constant arguments and emotional roller coaster are exhausting. I don't know if I can keep living like this. It's hard because I never wanted things to reach this point. I genuinely wanted to fix our marriage, and I've tried so many times to address our problems. But it feels like I've been trying alone. Now, after everything she said and all the divorce threats, I don't know if I can go back. I want what's best for our daughter, and I want to be a good father. But I can't keep sacrificing my mental health and well-being just to hold everything together by myself. Looking back, I stand by my decision to take my daughter and leave. If I had to make that choice again, I would do it the same way. Over the years, I've tried to encourage my wife to find something for herself, whether a job, an education, or even hobbies outside the home. But nothing ever came of it. She stayed in the same place, and now I feel stuck too. I've reached a point where I need to decide if I can give her one more chance, or if it's time to move on for my own sake and our daughter's future. After years of tension and emotional distance, I found myself desperately searching for solutions. I made several suggestions to my wife. Find a job, get a hobby, meet new friends. I thought these changes could help her feel more fulfilled, give her something outside of household stress to focus on, and maybe even improve our relationship. I even suggested she see a professional who could guide us through this rough patch, but no matter what I suggested, she refused to acknowledge anything was wrong. Every time, she'd simply say no or dismiss my concerns, insisting that she wasn't the problem. She'd say, "My daughter is my priority," as if to shut down any discussion about the issues between us. Through all of this, I made sure never to fight in front of our daughter. I grew up in a volatile household, where my parents' constant fighting left scars. I remember the day my mother finally left, and my father turned his anger on me. That experience shaped me deeply, and I swore I'd never expose my own child to that kind of environment. I promised myself I would protect her from toxicity at all costs. I had endured, but now I find myself wondering if I've just been delaying an inevitable collapse. One hard truth I've had to face is that you can't force someone to get help. They have to truly want it for any real change to happen. You can push, but if they're only going through the motions, nothing meaningful changes. While I'm not blameless in this situation, I've made plenty of mistakes too. I can't keep raising my daughter in an environment where dysfunction becomes her idea of a normal relationship. I promised myself when I was younger that I'd never become like my father. After a lot of reflection, I knew something had to change. I sat down with my wife and told her I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep living in a constant state of fighting and emotional strain. I made it clear that the threats of divorce, the anger, all of it, had to stop. To my surprise, she agreed. She promised she wouldn't bring up divorce again. I told her, though, that if it was ever used as a threat again, it would be the last time. We decided to go to couples therapy, and honestly, it was a revelation. We started talking about things we'd both been bottling up for years, feelings that had been buried, frustrations we didn't even realize we were holding on to. Having a neutral, outside perspective helped us see each other in ways we hadn't before. After a few sessions, I really believed we were turning a corner. My wife seemed to be putting in more effort. She got a job, started making new friends, and even picked up a hobby. I felt a sense of relief, like maybe we were finally finding our way back to each other. But then, everything unraveled again. We had made plans involving our daughter, something we both agreed on, and she completely overlooked it. She'd made other plans with her new coworkers and couldn't cancel them. This led to another argument, one I thought we had either resolved or at least moved past. But just as I was ready to let it go, the conflict resurfaced. She muttered something under her breath. I knew marrying you was a mistake. I froze, unsure if I had heard her correctly. I asked her to repeat it, and she didn't hesitate. She looked me in the eye and said, "I should have divorced you years ago." In that moment, it felt like I was staring at a stranger. The woman in front of me wasn't the person I had married. It was as if something in her had shifted, or maybe it had always been there, and I was just seeing it clearly for the first time. I didn't know who she was anymore. I walked away and took our daughter to the plans we had made. Just the two of us. That night, I made a decision. I couldn't live like this any longer, and I couldn't let our daughter grow up in an environment where this behavior became her version of normal. The next day, I filed for legal separation. We agreed on several terms during the separation. We would remain legally married, and neither of us would get involved with anyone else. We would split our finances, but I would continue paying for her insurance through my work. Therapy would continue, both individually and as a couple. We also agreed on shared custody of our daughter, with a 70-30 split. I moved in with my sister, and we tried to make the arrangement work as smoothly as possible. One day, when I had our daughter, I needed my wife to take her for a few hours. I had let her know a week in advance, and she had agreed. But when I went to drop our daughter off at the house, something felt different. There was an unfamiliar car in the driveway. I assumed it was a friend or maybe one of her new coworkers. But something about the situation felt off. Out of respect, I rang the doorbell and waited with our daughter beside me. When the door opened, a shirtless man answered. He looked at me like he didn't know who I was, and I felt my heart drop. I asked for my wife, and he called her to the door. She came around the corner in a robe, and the look on her face said everything. First, she was curious, then shocked, then embarrassed. She knew she'd been caught. In that moment, I realized it was truly over. Any hope I had of reconciliation was gone. In 3 months, when our legal separation ends, I'll be filing for divorce. There's no going back. My daughter doesn't fully understand what's happening yet. All she knows is that mommy and daddy aren't happy with each other anymore. But, as always, she is my priority. I'm doing everything I can to protect her from the fallout. I swore to myself that I would never end up like my parents. I promised I would break the cycle. But here I am, facing the reality that I couldn't avoid it. I couldn't stop myself from becoming part of the same story. I tried so hard to escape. All I can do now is show my daughter how much I love her and do my best to raise her in a healthy, stable environment, no matter how much has changed.